Hello everyone and welcome to the Safety Artisan, home of safety engineering training. I'm Simon and today we're going to be carrying on with our series on Mil-Std-882E system safety engineering. And today we're going to be moving on to the subject of operating and support hazard analysis. And this is, as it says, task 206 under the standard. So operating and support hazard analysis, I'll just call it O&S or O&SHA for short. Unfortunately, that will confuse people if I call it O&SHA. Let's call it O&S. So the purpose of O&S hazard analysis is to identify and assess hazards introduced by those activities and procedures, and also to evaluate the adequacy of O&S procedures, processes, equipment, facilities, etc., to mitigate risks that have been already identified. So a twofold task, but a very big task. And as we'll see, we've got lots of slides today on task description, reporting, contracting, and commentary. And as always, I present the full text as is of the task, which is copyright free, but I'm only going to talk about the things that are important. So we're not going to go through every little clause of the standard. That would be pointless. So let's get started with the purpose. And as we've already said, it's to identify and assess those hazards which are introduced by operational and support activities and procedures, forgive me, and evaluate their adequacy. So we're looking at operating the system, whatever it may be. And of course, this is a military standard, so we assume a military system, but not all military systems are weapon systems by any means. Not all are physical systems. So there may be inventory management systems, management information systems, all kinds of stuff. So does operating those systems and does supporting them, maintaining them, resupplying them, disposing of them, etc., does that create any hazards or introduce any hazards? And how do we mitigate? So that's the purpose of the task. So let's move on to the task description. So again, we're assuming a contractor is performing the analysis, but that's not necessarily the case. And for this task, it actually says this typically begins during engineering and manufacturing development, or EMD. So we're assuming an American style life cycle for a big system here, and EMD comes after sort of concept and requirements development. So we are sort of beginning to move into the very expensive stage of development for a system, and where we begin to commit serious money. And so we're suggesting that O&SHA can wait until then, which is fine in general, unless you've identified any particularly novel hazards that will need to be dealt with earlier on. And as it says, it should build on design hazard analyses. But we'll also talk about the case later on when there is no design hazard analysis. And the O&SHA shall identify requirements or alternatives for eliminating hazards, mitigating risks, etc. And this is one of those tasks where the human is very important, in fact, dominant, to be honest, both as a source of hazards and the potential victim of the associated risks. So a lot of human-centric stuff going on here. Okay, so as always, we're going to think about the system configurations. We're going to think about what we're going to do with the system and the environment that we're going to do it in. So a familiar triad, and I know I keep banging on about this, but this really is fundamental to bounding and therefore evaluating safety. We've got to know what the system is, what we're doing with it, and the environment in which we're doing it. Okay, let's move on. So again, human factors regulatory requirements and particularly specified personnel requirements need to be thought of. So particularly for operating and support, we need to take into account the staffing and personnel concept that we have. It's frighteningly easy to produce a system that needs so much maintenance, for example, or support activity, that it is unaffordable. And lots of military systems, and must be said government and commercial systems in the past have come in that required enormous amounts of support, which soon proved to be unaffordable, or no one would sign up to the commitment required. So lots of projects have simply died because the system was going to be too expensive to sustain. So that's a key point of what we're doing with O&S here. It's not just about health and safety, it's about health and safety which is affordable. Okay. We need to look at unplanned events, so not just designed in things, but things introduced. It says human errors. Again, I'm going to re-emphasize it's erroneous human action, because human error makes it sound like the human is at fault, whereas very often it's the design or the concept or the requirements that are at fault and place unacceptable burdens on the human being. Again, lots of messy systems seen in the past which didn't quite work, and we just kind of expected the operator to cope. And most of the time they cope, and then every so often they have a bad day at the office, or a bunch of factors come together and lots of people die. And then we blame the human. Well, it's not the human's fault at all. We put them in that